Good morning, John. Sometimes in the course of your life, you will click a link that will not go anywhere and you will get a cute little 404 message from the website. Sometimes it's super cute, sometimes it's stock. 404 Media, a news organization that is named after the error itself, has a pretty kick-ass 404 page. But this being error 404 has to leave you wondering, what are the other 403 errors? And I went down a rabbit hole to figure the answer to that question out, and now to save you time, I shall present you my results. Spoiler! There are not 403 other errors. I know this might be disappointing, but in fact, while 404 is an error code, it is part of a system that sends more than just errors. In fact, the vast majority of the codes sent by this system are not errors. This system is called the Hypertext Transfer Protocol Status Code System. It is, at this point in 2025, wild that every URL starts with HTTP, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Hypertext, that brings you back. Really does. Basically, the status code system is how servers tell your web browser how things are going. Servers, by the way, are the computers that are in big buildings somewhere that are actually storing the files that you are loading when you go to a website. So I type a URL into my browser, say like google.com/search, and then my browser sends that to a server, and the first thing the server does is checks to see if that's gonna work. It says, okay, Google, what do you have at /search? And if it doesn't contain anything, the server will reply, 404 not found. And then usually it will also present some custom code that is readable by a web browser, and that custom code is the body of the 404 page you see. But if google.com/search does point to something, then the server will reply 200 OK. And that's a code you'll never actually see because everything's going well and it's just going to load the website. But there's a bunch of other status codes that might show up in the meantime, most of them being invisible. They'll be received by your browser but never displayed to you. So in very brief, here are the other 403 codes, though of course there are not 403 of them. Like any good classification system, the first digit is a categorizer, and then it counts up from there, and usually doesn't get very far. In the 100s, we have informational codes. These are not used very often. They were used more often in the early internet, but they might be used, for example, if a browser is trying to send a big file and wants to make sure that it will be accepted. So the browser might say, hey, I got a file. It's 2 gigabytes. It's a movie file. I'd like you to send me code 100 to make sure you'll allow it. And then the server, if it will allow it, says 100, continue. Or if the server has some code saying, actually don't do that, it will reply 403, forbidden. There's a bunch of 100 codes that basically say, okay, I got your request, you can keep going. They can be used to switch protocols or speed up loading by telling the server to preload libraries and stuff like that. Basically, 100 codes are saying, I'm here, I hear you, keep going. 200 codes you never see because they're the ones that are just saying, excellent, we did it. Code 200 itself is just, okay, here's the thing that you asked for. There's also codes for I made the thing you asked for, and also I did it, but there's nothing here, which you might think is just 404, but no. This might happen if, for example, you have asked the server to delete something. The thing is now gone, so it can't show it to you, but it did succeed. So the 200s are basically saying everything worked. 300 codes are basically redirects, like I know what you're looking for, but it isn't here, but I do know where it is, so I'm going to send you to where it is. There are different ways of doing this, and the browser needs to know which way the server is doing it, so it's going to use different codes depending on how it's doing it. But that's the 300s. 400s, we are already familiar with. That is when you or your browser messes up. You tried to go somewhere that doesn't exist, or that you weren't supposed to be, or the request was malformed, or you aren't properly logged in. 400 codes are the server saying there is a problem, and the problem is with you. And then there's the 500s. That's when they messed up. The most common, very broad one is 500 internal server error. You've probably seen this. It's basically saying something broke, it's my fault, and I don't want to talk about it. And there are also more specific errors for when the server doesn't know what to do, when they aren't getting a response from the server at all, when the server is taking too long to respond, or when the server is overloaded. 500s are the code that the server sends to basically say, it's not you, it's me. And the 600s don't exist. So that's the whole thing. So of course, in custom codes, there are often Easter eggs. Twitter somewhat famously had a custom 400 error code for when a user was sending too many requests. It would throw error 420, too many requests, which was kind of a way of saying, dude, maybe take a bong rip and chill. But the only Easter egg that I know of that was actually ever built into a lot of instances of HTTP was error 418, which was jokingly implemented in the late 90s when people were like goofing around about creating a specific coffee maker based protocol. This was all goofs, but for some reason, error 418 was created, and that is for the imaginary circumstance in which the connected device that is getting instructions for making coffee is in fact a teapot. And when that happens, it will throw error 418, I am a teapot, which you can still see reported by Google at google.com/teapot. And so now you know the other 403 codes, though of course there are not 403 other codes. I don't know how many there are, but now you get it. It's just ways for computers to talk to each other, and most of the time that doesn't reach you, but in these very specific circumstances, it does. John, I'll see you on Tuesday.